All right, everyone. Welcome in UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. That is former Georgia NFL tight end Arthur Lynch. Guys, already was all SEC once first team all SEC once back in the day. And he sat here on this show last week and we were talking about this Georgia Mississippi State game, just trap game central. I think that was what the title of the show last week because it had all the makings of it. And Georgia comes in and happens to play the brand of Georgia football that we haven't seen in at least a year. And he was calling for a blowout. Now Mississippi State did, jump in there with a few points at the end, a little garbage time because Georgia had its backups in by that point. But I just want to give my props to Artie, here, my co-host. And he called that one, man. Georgia showed out from the get-go, right? Defense was humming early and the offense was just unstoppable early. And you had 30 first downs for Georgia. You had 58% on third down, 567 total yards. Georgia ran the ball 303 yards. Nate Frazier, 15.1 yards per carry, 12 for 181. He had a long of 59. Little breakaway action from Nate Frazier. Stockton, 18 of 29, 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had another 30-something on the ground. Zach Branch, consistent, 8 catches and a touchdown. Noah Thomas, 64-yard touchdown. KJ Bolden had 10 tackles. Raylan Wilson, 1.5 sacks. Held Mississippi State to 322 total yards for an offense that was humming, has been humming really all season. So Georgia broke the trend. And it was pretty cool, I think, Artie, from this standpoint, because we talked about last week for a while. We were like, we were hyping up Chauncey Bowens, who deserves it. He's played really well this year. He's come on strong, young kid, right? We talked about how Colby Young's injury and Noah Thomas having to step up. He dropped a big one the week prior against Florida. Now, he did come back and make up for that during that game, but we were talking about how he needed to step up too with Colby out. So it was kind of cool seeing that Noah Thomas comes in there and breaks away with a 64-yarder. Looks really good, man. He has a really big dude moving fast down the field. You want to see that? But then again, so Nate Frazier heard that mess we talked about Chauncey Bowens, and he came up and really showed out against Mississippi State with some breakaway speed too. So really cool thing if you're a Georgia fan to watch that happen because you're seeing this team trend in the right direction. Artie, how do you think that plays into things when you're going into a game like Texas, where you've already have an SEC loss? You got 2 teams at the top of the SEC and A&M and Alabama without a conference loss. Texas is sitting there with 1 conference loss. And you're able to get through that trap game and come in strong into this really one of the biggest games of the week next week, Texas coming to Athens.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's when you think about the reason I was so confident in this game in particular is because I actually thought the trap game was the Florida game because of everything that was going on in terms of, I think it became very inevitable that Billy Napier was going to get fired. It's kind of the last game in not the last game ever, but they're taking a break from Jacksonville. And I just think that, like, for the most part, from the standpoint of like let's call it importance, I would imagine that a lot of Georgia folks, even though it's always such an important game, it's not necessarily probably wasn't the top of mind, right? And I think this game coming up, because last week it was an emotional win, because it's always an emotional win in Jacksonville. I thought Kirby was going to be pretty like on message all week with his team. Now it's like, I don't know what that message was. My guess was like, hey, like, we can't get to where we want to go unless we play better than we did last week, right? Like, we basically went toe to toe with a team that has talent, but for lack of a better word, was, reeling and has been reeling for past couple of years. I'm talking about Florida. And so I think moving forward, I was very confident in this game because I was like, they're going to get their act together because they know that they have to be, at midseason form. And we're a little bit, I would say, past midseason at this point. to go receive and welcome University of Texas to Athens and beat them, right? And like, if you don't think about it, if you take a step back and kind of look at the messaging on the other side of the field, right? Or excuse me, yeah, we'll call it that, the other side of the field with Texas, we've beaten up Texas pretty good now, like in some national spotlights in their home field in Atlanta, right? I think the last time, and correct me if I'm wrong, we got the worst end of that battle was when Uga got, nearly, horned by the Bevo.
Yeah.
And I think that was in 2019. And the head coach was, what was his
Herman?
name? Tom Herman, yeah. Right? And the quarterback was that kind of like Tebow-like kid.
Is it Eckler? Not Eckler. Who was
not
it?
Eckler,
Ellinger. Come on.
Who was a great player. Like, I'm not knocking him. Like, a Tebow light is a pretty good compliment if you ask me.
That was the Texas is back speech, right?
After to be fair, they won the Sugar Bowl against a really good team, a team whose DNA was all over that 2021, national championship team, right? Mm-hmm. So like, and this was a long-winded way of saying, like, I think Texas is actually also in midseason form. I think they were trying to find their identity early on. I think a lot of people, and you and I talked about this briefly, I think last week, about Arch Manning. I actually think Arch Manning is playing his best football right now. And to his credit, went through some adversity, both physical, psychological, and just, on the field. And in my opinion, has come out on the other side a better football player for it, which leads me to believe that this moment coming up is not too big for him at this point. So, and I think Kirby knows that. Like, Kirby's a very high emotionally intelligent person, and you have to be a very good and elite football coach, just at any level. And so I'm super excited to kind of see this game, because I think both teams are playing their best football, A, and I think B, they both understand the magnitude of what this game means. Georgia has some room to breathe, I think, because just the nature of where the college football landscape is right now.
Right. It's their last SEC game, right?
Right.
No, you're right. You said it right there. They're Georgia's last SEC game, right? You got Charlotte, who's won one game this season, and then you go and you play Tech and Mercedes. For Texas, you got this game, and then you have to play A&M.
Oh, dude, like they and they know that, though. So I think when Texas sees that, they're going to have extra motivation. They're going to be extra focused, right? I think Sark has done a good job of probably quelling whatever those rumors are, and I actually think I don't think there's a lot of merit to the rumors of him going to the NFL, and it just never made sense. But that being said, I think this is going to be a really tough opponent. It was going to be a tough game no matter what, because there's going to be so much noise around it. But, you think about how big, I remember how big it was when, like, we went to Missouri for the first time in 2012 when Missouri entered the SEC, and how big of a deal that was, right? And it was Missouri, and they were a good football team, but they weren't Texas. You know what I mean? And I think when you're welcoming a University of Texas, albeit it's not the first year that they're in the SEC, it is the first time that, like, this is a historic, like, globally recognized college football brand that's coming into University of Georgia, into Athens for the first time. Arch Manning, like, another Manning wearing, like, in an orange UT. It's like there's so many cool storylines behind it. And so I'm excited to watch it. As you and I discussed offline, I canceled my YouTube TV subscription. I'm now on ESPN Bundle just so I can watch it. But I think I think they did a really good job this week taking care of business. But I think this week, is going to be as close to a coin flip as we're going to see so far between two powerhouses, because I think Texas is playing very good football, but to the credit of University of Georgia staff, Kirby and company, it's like, so are we. Yeah.
And we'll get into that Texas game too and talk about those things that you mentioned and kind of break those down. So last thing I want to mention on this Mississippi State game, two things. So one, 900th win in Georgia football history, the 9th program to do so in college football. Very cool. You wonder the motivation for the Mississippi State game on the road at noon, 11 a.m. local kick after an emotional win against your hated rival in Florida. And you heard the players, especially Nate Frazier, kind of expand upon after the game, Kirby Smart as well, about a Georgia football staffer who unfortunately and sadly passed away. Miss Kim. Now, one of those people in a football facility that is just a positive sponge, right? And motivated these players and coaches every day. They're at 5:30 a.m. every day in the football facility. These players really grew a relationship with her, and all they did was mention her after that game. So I think, just thoughts and prayers to her family, and I'm glad Georgia was able to kind of donate or tribute that win against Mississippi State to her. I mean, that was really heartwarming, I think, seeing that after the game. But two, I think it's, on another note, it speaks to the coaching staff and Kirby Smart and using might be the wrong word, but, motivating his players with something that they cared about, and trying to instill that culture of the program within them in a different way, which is, do it for these people who come in and show up every day and help you get through this very crazy time in your life in college as a kid, trying to grow, getting smarter every day, but then also having to deal with, the chaotic nature of college football and being at a program like Georgia. And those people come in every day and send positive words and thoughts, prayers your way. And you can actually answer and give them something to hold on to on the field every Saturday. So I thought that was really cool, and I wanted to mention that. But okay, so Texas. All right, so you said they're playing their best football. I agree. We mentioned a little bit last week, kind of as a foreshadowing to this game that we knew was going to come up. Manning has grown into a competent SEC starter, right? And I think he's only going to get better. There's flashes of greatness, right? But overall, I think he's grown into a competent starter. Won 4 straight since the loss at Florida, right? They're coming off a bye week into Athens, right? They had a 3-point win at home versus a tough Vandy team before their bye week. And I want to stop right there, Artie, because when you have a play caller like Sarkisian, a very precise offensive coach, you give him extra time to prepare. I think he's going to show up ready, and I wouldn't be surprised if Texas is showing some very interesting things early in that game. It kind of reminds me of, you talk about it with Bobo, right? And scripting 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 drives early in the game. Now, of course, you have to adjust if you see something you weren't prepared for. But, those guys I think Bobo and Sarkisian are really good at doing that. And you give him extra time to prepare for really a Georgia secondary and safety group that's really kind of one of the weaknesses of the defense, man. I wouldn't be surprised if Texas is throwing all over the yard early.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And if you kind of look at Arch Manning and the season that he's had, it's like people kind of make it seem like he's been like somewhat of an unmitigated disaster. And I think that's just like completely off base. I think statistically, he's had a really good year. It's his first full-time year as a starter. He's battling injuries, and not for nothing. They did graduate a decent amount of folks over the past,
especially on the offensive line, right, Artie? And
totally.
He had 5. You said it there. People, I think, are still holding on to what happened early in the season with Arch because he had 5 interceptions through first 5 games, right? And now look, 1 over the last 4.
Yep. And look, he's it's not like he was a 2-star kid, right? He's got the name. Don't get me wrong, but I'm sure that played into it a little bit. But he's a good football player, and he's a starting quarterback at University of Texas. They are going to be hungry. They need to win this game. I don't think if they lose this game, they're out of playoff contention because it's a 12-team thing, and there's a lot of football left to be played. And if they come back and win A&M, they could easily sneak back in there because A&M, I think, is the clear best team in the country. You know what I mean? Particularly after winning the way they beat Missouri this week. But I think what Georgia has done is they're becoming to be a very balanced football team. At least on the offensive side of the ball. They're throwing the ball more, they're throwing it well. And I think they're really, really understanding that this is a run first football team, not in the sense of because their pass game is weak and they don't have the weapons. On the contrary, I think their receiving core, tight end and receiver included, is playing at a much higher level this year than they have the previous 2. And I think that goes a long way for Gunnar Stockton, who I don't really consider a young quarterback anymore. I think he's got confidence. He's able to run. He's tough. He's got the trust of his team. Obviously, defensively, it's probably not as consistent as it has been in years past. CJ Allen is a stud. He's going to make plays. But at least what we saw this past weekend is that the offense has the firepower to put a lot of points on the board. And what we saw, I believe it was 2 weeks ago at Ole Miss, or was it 3 weeks? 3 weeks ago, excuse me, in Ole Miss. I guess that's 4 weeks ago because there's a bye, right? But we can win in a shootout. And understanding what you were talking about with Sark, understanding that Arch Manning does have the ability to air it out efficiently with like anybody, like the best, some of the best quarterbacks in the country. We might be in a situation where it's a 45-42 football game. You know what I mean? It comes down to the last play of the game. I don't necessarily think this is going to be like it was week 1 against Ohio State, right? Mm-hmm. Where young quarterbacks are kind of deadlocked in a defensive battle. I think it's going to be, you have 2 seasoned quarterbacks who have gained the respect and the trust of their teams. And those teams have developed, the playmakers they have on the roster to be playmakers for their teams, right? And both are playing their best football. So I actually expect it to be kind of probably a high-scoring game and pretty fun one to watch. But we'll see how it goes. You know what I mean? Fundamentally, we got to play the football game. But I think the storylines are making up for a fun shootout, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Texas offensive-wise, an adjusted offense efficiency, the 37th in the country. You don't really, just based on what we've seen and really what the media has run with, you wouldn't feel, if you didn't look into it, that Texas offense was that good. You think they were one of the worst in the country. They're not. They've gotten better as the seasons went on, I think, and it has been with Arch in the passing game, right? Because you have 4 receivers on that Texas roster right now averaging over 13 yards per catch and all over at least 200 yards receiving and multiple touchdowns for each. When they do go deep, they're usually pretty good at it. It works out for them. Where it hasn't worked out for them, and I think it's his offensive line thing. I mean, and partly on Arch Manning for just being a young guy and getting his first season as the guy and holding on the ball too long, which he especially did through the first part of the season, is he has 18 sacks. And also that they're only running for 3.9 yards per carry overall. Now, that's not a horrible number, but it's not great when you consider that what you want to do offensively and not being one-dimensional. So Texas, unfortunately, for Longhorns fans, when they have gotten to those games where they're going to lose or in a tough shootout with a team that doesn't have as much talent, so they can't run the ball. And you become one-dimensional. So I think that's where Georgia can get some advantage there and to force Arch Manning to beat him with his arm. And I think that's what Kirby Smart wants them to do. You're going to win some and lose some there, and you hope that your defense is able to get off the field at the right times, which they have done most of the year, and especially last week against Mississippi State. You think all things considered, Georgia, and that's what I wanted to see personally from that team, was run the ball early and run it well, and they did. And then what does that do on defense, right? It gives you opportunities to rest a little bit more to get ready for the next drive, and then Georgia was able to get off the field early against Mississippi State. So it allowed you to kind of coast, which is all things considered really good going into this game. I think for a defense-wise, Texas, man, they're really good, right? They're number 10 in adjusted defensive efficiency. And if you wonder what that is adjustment to group of 5 teams and garbage time, right? So it's basically analyzing that team and that unit in pressure situations against good teams, and they're number 10 in the country. So they get after the quarterback already. That's what we saw last year too. These two teams, Georgia and Texas, both were getting after each other in the backfield. And you got some really good players on that side. And that's what we were thinking. That's why Texas was so highly preseason rated, which, one, everybody was thinking Arch Manning was going to be, Jesus. But 2 is that defense, right? It was kind of Arch Manning in that defense. You've got Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill Jr., 8 sacks for Simmons, 4 sacks for Hill Jr. So far. You got 34 total sacks as a Texas team. You got a secondary.
That's a ridiculous amount of sacks. I didn't realize that.
Yes, sir. And they played some good teams too. Yeah. Right. They played some good teams on there. It's not like they're playing, our hearts of Charlotte University. Secondary with 9 interceptions thus far. Second in run defense at 78 yards per game. I think it's a pass thing for Georgia, an offense who didn't punt last week. An offense has actually scored the most points in conference play in the SEC this year. Pass yards between the 20s, man. Move the ball, because that's where Texas is 92nd in pass defense, allowing 235 yards per game. Now, a lot of teams do pass more against them because running the ball against them is a little tough. But, I mean, that's where they're successful, man. You pick your poison. Georgia's been able to pass to win or run and control the game and still win too. So it's really interesting, man. I think people are really going to talk about this standpoint already, which was last year's matchups, where one, you had the game at Texas. Georgia really controlled both lines of scrimmages. 30-15 was the final score. It was actually a little bit worse than that and should have been. But, Texas scored late. And then you have the SEC championship game, which is more of a back-and-forth battle, and Gunnar Stockton comes in and wins it for him in overtime. But in those games, Georgia had 7 sacks in the first one, 10 tackles for loss, and then 6 sacks, 15 tackles for loss in the second matchup. Just on my opinion, I think Georgia wins a different way. I don't know if they have the guys up front as much depth that can get to the quarterback like that. You did have a good game last week where you had like a guy like Christian Miller and Raylan Wilson getting the backfield a lot. But I just don't see Georgia racking up 15 tackles for loss and 6 sacks here and controlling it that way.
No, and look, you got to. It's just because there's a new offensive line or more. Just because they had a young offensive line at Texas for the first 4 games, similarly to Arch Manning, to Gunnar Stockton, to anybody else when we're week 7, 8, 9, 10 in a college football season, they're no longer young. And what Texas and any good coach would do is they're going to take their film from last year and see okay, what did we do well? What did we not do well? And so they're going to be like, okay, well, we lost the games because these 3 things last year. So we're going to make sure that we correct those 3 things and that this Georgia team is going to have to beat us a different way. And so I think about that, and I think about, from a game planning perspective, what Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo, and Schumann are going to do. I don't think Georgia's defense is as explosive and as disruptive as it has been in recent years. However, I do think they have disruptive players on that defense, and they will find ways to use them. But I really think it comes back to offense, right? I think Georgia's going to be like, okay, when we have been at our best all season, what have we done very, very well? We have run the football at a very high and efficient level, and we've run blocks really, really well, and we've used Gunnar in certain ways and used his physicality in certain ways that has softened up the defense so we could be able to throw the ball downfield at different points in the game. And I think when you have 32 sacks, 30 sacks, whatever it is, and you have Simmons who's got 8 sacks, like the best thing that you can do to take them out of the game is actually run directly at them, right? And I think when you're looking about, okay, well, how do we take their best asset away from them, which right now is their pass rush ability and their defense, is establish the run super early on and try to out physical them. And that's something that we used to do when we played against like Clowney, right? Or we played against Von Miller in the toilet bowl of Shreveport in 2009, right? And you kind of have like a number of these different Vic Beasley against Clemson, right? You have all these different, these pass rushing guys who just can disrupt the quarterback from a pass rush perspective. But the best way to take them out of the game is to not try to double or triple team them, but just like run right at them, right? Hit them in the chin, because those guys don't like getting hit in the mouth. What they like to do is hit people in the mouth, right? And I think the best way to do that is take those 2 big tight ends you have. Well, hopefully, knock on wood, everyone's healthy and ready to go. Mm-hmm. But and just run the ball, man. And, make them stop you, make them, put you 3 and out. But if you're running the ball well, play action pass, even if you don't get touchdowns early on, but you're kind of grinding out that clock. I think that's a really good way for the Georgia's offense to kind of wear them down and soften them up. But
I love that.
Man, it's I was surprised that they won the second game last year, because it's very hard to beat a good team twice.
Right.
And so I think Texas they're hungry, man. They are hungry to beat Georgia. So if I'm Georgia, what do we do well? What do we know that probably isn't going to work for us? Let's try to shy away from that and double down on what we know how to do and do well. And I think that's run the football and be very, very physical up front.
Dude, put me in, coach. Let me run through a brick wall already. I love that.
100%, man.
Dude,
definitely.
Because that's what if you all boil down to it, and this is like Georgia fans, I guess, around my age and more, I guess. We didn't really start airing it out unless you're Aaron Murray and Artie Lynch and Travaris King and those guys. We didn't start airing it out like that until maybe Stetson Bennett later in the 21.
Yeah, it's true, dude. 100%.
But I grew up, man, when we were running the ball for 200 yards a game, 250, 300, that's where I was having fun watching Georgia football, because you had some really great running backs and tight ends that were blocking their butts off. So that's what I like to watch.
Dude, I mean, Delp and Lucky, man, they were not big guys coming in. They had big frames, but like they didn't have like the legs or like or the width of the girth, right? But like in credit to the strength team or strength program at Georgia, like those dudes are big dudes, man. Like those
Especially
are like
Oscar. Oscar is really grown, bro.
Dude, that dude's an NFL tight end, right?
Yeah.
He's got the frame of a Charlie Warner, right? Of a little bit thicker than the Fitzpatrick kid. Nobody's the size of Darnell Washington. That dude's just a creature. But they block very well. And they're tough, man. And they play assignment football. And man, like I love watching Bobo play, which is funny to say because he's, Bobo's. You think of Bobo, you think of Mike Bobo, but like, man, he's a tough kid, and I knew he would be tough. You know what I mean? But like, he run blocks really well. He doesn't have many missed assignments, right? And that defense, I mean, that offensive line has gotten better in the pass pro.
They've gotten so much better. Come on, we got to talk about that.
But they have been a good run football team since day one, and so. They've just been kind of waiting for those running backs to get some like confidence in their legs. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think now you start seeing the confidence in their legs, and you start seeing the confidence in Gunner as well, who like is no longer like every time you throw the ball, you're like, like, you know what I mean? Like, is it, I'm not because he doesn't have the arm or doesn't have the talent, just because like, is he good or is he just like a tough like Georgia boy? And I think he's a good quarterback. So I'm very excited to watch the game because I do think it's the storyline is end up going to be like, this strong physical playmaking ability of the defense of Texas. Are they going to bend break or are they going to dominate the strong physical, dominate the line of scrimmage up front run game of Georgia? And
that's going to be tough.
Bend up break. Totally.
Yeah. I think it's going to be tough sledding for Georgia in that offensive line early because when you think about it like a defense on the road with all the storylines and the hype that's going to be in that stadium, they're going to be
fired up, dude.
Oh, yeah, right? So you're going to have to wear them down eventually. And the question is, how quickly can you do it? And then also, to me, like, we're going to see a lot of screens and extension of that run game just to get them moving, get them running sideline to sideline and hopefully get some space, right, to open it up in the middle. And I think, too, having a guy like Zach Branch and like Chauncey, you can catch it out of the backfield, and Cash Jones are going to come in big, I think. But then also the tight ends, man, and we can sit on it for a minute because, with this YouTube TV thing and then like half the people having to listen on the radio, the other people are searching for streams. Like you might have missed some football recent the last 3-4 weeks, right? So for the
no comment, coach.
Yeah. And for those who haven't been able to watch too, it's like these tight ends, for especially Lawson Lucky and Oscar Delp and how they're blocking. I'll throw even Ellis Williams in there too, the freshman. How they're blocking has been really a sight to see, I think, man. They are opening up. They're basically extension of the offensive line. We're also having a really good season receiving in big moments. Lawson had 3 touchdowns the other day. Oscar got his first yesterday. And I'm impressed with those guys, how they've grown. But also, another thing I want to mention is like you haven't watched, you would miss this thing. Because when people score, whether it be receiver or running back, whoever scores in the end zone, the first 3 guys that are in your face on that screen, hyping up the team, hyping up whoever scored, pushing that confidence to them is Oscar Delp, Lawson Lucky, and Drew Bobo.
Yep.
Every single time, man. They are driving the energy, which I think is very, very important when you get later in the season. When guys are run down, they're playing half injured. You've got big game after big game after big game. You're asked to perform at your highest level every week, which is really, it's obviously why we love this sport, and it's very fun to watch. But, I mean, keeping that energy up is important, which I really appreciate from these guys, and I think Georgia fans should too.
Couldn't agree more, man. And I think, like, that's when I was watching the hype video or whatever, and then and I know everyone on here knows I'm a homer to Mike Bobo and probably thinks I'm an idiot for it, and that's fine. You guys aren't the only people who think I'm an idiot. But But hearing Bobo like firing up those guys, he does a really good job of building like a family environment like within an offensive unit. And I mean, you do love Georgia, man. You just love Georgia, and you could tell that these guys love playing for each other because I think a lot of them have when I say a lot of them, I'm talking about the Georgia football team. Like we're now a couple of years removed from the national championship teams, from Stetson Bennett, from that kind of like miraculous run that we went on, right? And so I think a lot of these guys who were either there were super young and didn't play a lot, or kind of watched and came to Georgia to keep that run alive. So it's while they play for Georgia and they've had success, they've won a lot of football games, they realize that they're kind of like competing in order to kind of write their own legacy in history. And so they're playing for each other, not really playing to like defend the hill, if you will. Right. And I think when you're playing in that way and you're kind of like, hey, let's make our own path, let's make our own story. It's us versus like the world type mentality. That's when you start really like building that fellowship, if you will, within a team. And so there's a selflessness that comes with that, because you guys are like, I don't really care if I catch 0 passes or I catch 10 passes as a tight end. Like if we're winning the game, and that was always my mindset too, is like, as long as we're winning the game, man, like I could care less, because it's like I get so much anxiety about what it will feel like to lose and like letting down not just your teammates, but like also your coaches and just the larger community of Georgia fans in the university. And I think you see that with this team, which is like super important and a key ingredient in order to have success as a football team, particularly when people are trying to like carve their own path of like what type of players they're going to be. Because there's really no like star. CJ Allen's probably the biggest star, and then Branch is probably the second.
Yeah.
But there's no like, that's a dude. There are dudes, but you get what I'm saying. Like there's no Todd Gurley, AJ Green, Nick Chubb, Sony Michel,
Great. They're greats. Great.
You know what I mean? The greats, right? Bowers, right? And so I think that's super important. And sometimes those teams end up being the best teams. It's just they're not like the most dominant early on, because they're kind of going through these different levels of these different evolutions over the course of a season. Mm-hmm. But as long as the trend is up and to the right, you typically see them at the end of the year having a lot of success. So hopefully we're at the point where that they keep coming together as a unit in all 3 phases of the game and playing some good football. But
right, especially defensively, right? Because
totally.
And we're talking about those same, team dynamics on offense. We were just talking about with the tight ends too, and Drew Bobo. So like on defense, you mentioned him there, like CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson, those linebackers, which is the best group on this Georgia defense and one of the top in the country as far as units. Those are the energy drivers, the coaches on the field, the guys that have to. And it's even more, I think, more challenging maybe for them this season, because they haven't lived up to the Georgia defensive standard, which is talked about by every single Georgia team year and year. Even if it's new players, we have a standard. We have a standard. Nobody gets in our end zone. Well, a lot of people have been in your end zone this year.
Yeah, totally.
So you have to stay confident and, take those L's, man, and bounce back, right? So, and I'm proud of how they've kind of grown this year defensively and getting better week to week. You're going to come in with some big challenges here in the postseason. And especially, it's not important for us to look over this Texas team, but, Georgia Tech, that's going to be a heck of a game. And you're going to get punched in the mouth by that Georgia Tech offense. Yeah.
The DNA, and we could talk about this when we get to it. I'm excited about that because I've been a fan of Brent Key for a couple of years now. But the DNA of Georgia Tech and the DNA of Georgia are not that different, right? Like they play a similar game. And Haynes King is, he is a tough kid. He's got more miles on his body than Gunner, but Gunner and him have a lot of the similar traits, I would say, as a quarterback. And again, we'll have plenty of time to talk about that game, but I think, Georgia has a really awesome opportunity this week. It's not make or break for their season, but, I think it could really solidify them and put them in a great position moving forward from a momentum perspective, but also ranking in the top 12. Cause it looks like Alabama, this would be a good segue to talk about some of the other slates this weekend.
Oh yeah. We can do that. And we'll look at the CFP rankings a little bit too. Go ahead.
Yeah. But I think this is it'll be a unique opportunity for them because we're in the final stretch of the regular season at this point.
Yeah, and the fan base, man, the fan base would love to point 3-0 against Texas in the SEC.
100%, dude.
They can't wait for that. Excited to see it. So let's pick that game real quick, Artie. Texas at Georgia. Georgia's 6.5-point home favorite sitting on Sunday, November 9th. So the line's probably going to move either way. I could see it moving a little bit. I don't think much, but I think it's going to be a closer game. When you look at, obviously Georgia against really good teams, it's all been close. Also Texas, and I have a stat here for you on that. Let me find it real quick. So Texas' last 3 wins have featured 2 3-point wins and 1 win by touchdown, and that was against Mississippi State. I think it's going to be close. Give me Texas to cover the 6.5. I think Georgia wins, but yeah, that's what I'm going with. What do you think there, Artie? Well, let me give you a score on that then. I could see it high scoring. I just don't know. Defensively, Texas is tough, and I think Georgia played pretty good last week too. Arch Manning, he can hold the ball at times. Man, give me Georgia 28, Texas 24.
Damn. Okay. So I agree. I think it'll be a close game. I think Georgia will not cover. I think Texas will cover rather. But I actually think it's going to be a bit of a shootout, but towards the end.
Okay.
Right? I think of like the Oregon Penn State game from earlier in the season, where it's kind of a defensive. I think it's going to be a defensive battle. Probably like an 18, 15, or excuse me, like a 17, 14 game and a half or something, where it's like a lot of running some running touchdown, a lot of running, a lot of like moving the ball back and forth, blah, 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 but not a lot of like, breakout scores. And I think they're going to wear each other down. And then by the second half, both teams are going to open it up, and you're going to see, 2 worn down defenses a little bit not be able to kind of like keep up with offenses that really at this point, any given moment, can score big. So I actually think it's going to end up being like a 38-35 Georgia win, or like 41-38. So something kind of similar score to what we had with Ole Miss, but I just think it's going to break out in the second half. So it's probably going to be not a boring game, but like a physical, tough first half, not a lot of scoring, and then the second half is just going to turn it, right?
Yeah.
Both teams will make adjustments. Defense will be worn down a little bit. But I do think Georgia wins, mainly because it's a home game. I think it's going to just be I think Georgia's going to be able to lean into that home crowd. It's been a couple of weeks since they've been played at home. They've kind of gone on the road. And I think Texas ultimately will keep it close. But they're not going to do enough to win the football game, in my opinion.
Got it. Go Dogs. I think that especially is going to be important for Georgia, not coming off a bye like Texas is. A little bit pressure, lean on that home atmosphere and for energy late in the game, because I think Texas can wear you down both sides. So, all right, man. So that noted, let's talk a little CFP rankings. We can talk about what happened this past week on the slate. So it wasn't a massive slate. Basically, I mean, you had some buys too, from the 11th ranked team to 13th ranked team. So Texas, Oklahoma, Utah, they didn't play. They had on buys. But your top 10 teams minus BYU all won in the CFP ranking. So I don't think they're going to change much. So if you still got Ohio State, Indiana, who squeaked one out against Penn State, right? That late touchdown. Their quarterback, was it Mendoza, right? Didn't play great. Wasn't a great game for him. He had an interception late. Actually ended up backing it up and scoring a late touchdown, which was an incredible catch by the receiver in the back of the end zone.
Dude.
So he kind of answered that mistake.
That was, I think, assuming they take care of business throughout the season, the rest of the season, and I think they got to play Ohio State. I'm not sure. I think he's going to win the Heisman Trophy, because that game, that ending was just unbelievable.
They're going to show that on the highlights, but I will say, you watched the whole game. He was not at his best.
It doesn't matter, because if he would have lost, that probably would have lost him the thing. But no one's going to talk about his stats that game. They're going to talk about that highlight. They're going to talk about that drive. They're going to talk about getting the ball back. They're going to talk about, going down the field. He basically threw a jump pass. If you watch, like, as he, on his first 2 throws, he stepped up in the pocket, in pressure, had the great catch on the sideline. But that that throw to win the game on that phenomenal touchdown catch, like he basically was like I'm talking about Mendoza now, jumped and threw it with hands in his face. And the catch itself was unbelievable, but I think if they win, they end up winning out here, that's going to be the play that that ultimately wins him the Heisman.
I can see them in New York for sure.
I think he's definitely going to New York. I think him and the running back from Notre Dame are definitely going to New York.
Jeremiah Love.
But I don't necessarily think anyone's going to take that kind of moment, if you will. Even though Penn State was down and out, it's still Happy Valley, dude, and they were playing better football. So we'll see how it goes. But
I can see your argument. I think Heisman-wise, this is one of the weakest fields since 2021, maybe Bryce Young. And his Heisman moment was really, torching Georgia in the SEC championship game. Just looked like the best quarterback in the country, and he ended up winning it. So this kind of reminds me of that field for Heisman. I could see multiple guys kind of making some splashes here in the late run, right? And I think it depends on that. Let's say like A&M, Marcel Reed, Alabama, Ty Simpson, and then Ohio State, Julian Sayin. I can see any of those guys. And you got to talk about Gunner too, but I just don't. I guess with the loss to Alabama, nobody's talking from that standpoint. I just don't know. I mean, his stats are amazing. He's led a really good team with some defensive issues to a 7-1 record here going into Texas. I mean, he deserves some conversation too. And even Chambliss from Ole Miss. So it's like a lot of guys are there, but I don't know if anybody's separated themselves, maybe other than Marcel Reed and Mendoza, and if Notre Dame, if they were able to win out too, which they probably will, sitting there with 2 losses. But CFP, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. I don't disagree, but again, it's about the story, and while Gunner Stockton is a great story, particularly for Georgia folks, like the Mendoza one has so many kind of quirks to it, and he's a quirky kind of kid. But at the same time, they're playing very good football, and it's as I was texting my friend group yesterday, watching the Indiana versus Penn State game. It's amazing what a good football coach and alignment from the donor base can do for a college football team, because I think everyone thought that this was another stepping stone for Cignetti, but I think it becomes clear that the donors of Indiana were like, you know what, we like being a football school, and we'll come together. Cuban will make his first donation to his college athletics program ever, and we will make Cignetti the 3rd highest paid football coach in college. And the only other 2 who were paid higher are guys who have 4 national championships between them, and that's Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney. So I think Indiana is here to stay, and I think they might not win a national championship this year, but I think they'll have a Heisman Trophy winner to brag about, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be a really great story for sure. Indiana, Ohio State, they're going to match up with each other here soon too. That'll be really interesting. Probably the biggest game for both of those schools. For Ohio State, that's not named Michigan.
Seriously, 100%.
No, the SEC it's a crazy race, right? In SEC, but from a CFP standpoint, it also plays a part because you got Bama right there in front of Georgia, which I think stays at 5. We could talk about this all day, but I think I want to come down to this because it's incredible where Texas Tech is too after beating BYU, but we weren't really sure about. They were undefeated, but now they're just going to keep rising because they don't have any harder games on their schedule. Probably win the Big 12 championship by 20 points, and then they're in. For Georgia fans, I just wonder where you want to be if you're not in the SEC championship, and I'm saying 5 seed, man, because if you're the 5 seed, you don't get a first round bye, but basically you don't play in the championship game, so you get that week off. And then you're welcoming the Group of 5 team to Athens. And, the Group of 5, you don't have a Boise State this year, which is really interesting, right? So I think whoever gets in, it was supposed to be Memphis until they just lost. So I don't even know who gets in there, but they're not going to be like having to play Boise State last year. So I think you kind of want to be at 5.
Yeah, look, I think my favorite when you're looking at college football, the rankings itself, and I just think moreover just kind of where the field is, man. I think you're seeing like while I don't necessarily think college football is at its best it's ever been in terms of like regulation and rules, I do think this kind of like NIL era has allowed other schools to kind of in an odd way punch above their historic weight.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing, right? Like, I think with the volatility of college football coaching, we're going to see less movement. Like you saw the SMU coach, he probably could have been the head coach for any of those teams that have openings. And he's like, you know what, I'm going to stay here because we have a good donor base. I've won a lot. I'm going to make $10 million a year. It's like, why go to LSU to make 13 to only be fired in 2.5 years? And so to your point about rankings, right, I think Texas Tech to me is one team that they have a ton of talent. They're playing some of their best football. They've kind of already they lost that game. They probably shouldn't have lost to a couple weeks ago. And
Arizona
I actually
State,
I actually think that's a good thing, right? Because when you're a team like Texas Tech and you're like undefeated, the pressure mounts pretty quickly to like remain undefeated. But they're like, all right, we already burst that bubble, so let's play a little bit more reckless, right? And this not reckless in the sense of make mistakes, but like, hey, let's go be aggressive. And I'm actually a little bit bullish on them to make a run. I know that's their Big 12, but it's very interesting. I mean, they beat the snot out of BYU. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And BYU is historically a good football team, but a very good football team this year. But I don't know who'll kind of make it out of that group of 5 or however it's described these days, but someone will. But I don't necessarily think there's anyone to like worry about. But I think out of those kind of like ascending football teams, no one's sleeping on Indiana anymore. But I think Texas Tech, and I know you mentioned it, I think Georgia Tech is another one, right? If you told me in 2 weeks that Georgia Tech beat Georgia, I would not be shocked, right?
No, and already on this, if we're talking about Tech, I mean, look at this. You looked at just yesterday. Let's look at this. The top 2 highest ranked ACC teams both lost, Virginia and Louisville, and they're right in front of Tech. So Virginia and Louisville 14-15, they just both go down. You had Vanderbilt beat Auburn, so they'll move up a little bit, and Georgia Tech's sitting right there at 17. So Georgia Tech's about to be the highest rated ACC team.
And I think that's important, right? Because like, again, when you talk about storylines, talk about hype, it's like, man, you could argue Georgia Tech should have taken down Georgia 2 years. Was it 2 years ago? It was like the 7 overtime game or whatever.
Oh, last year, 8 overtime last year.
Yeah, shit. That feels like 7 years ago, doesn't it? But yeah, man, I'm like, I think there's a lot of opportunity for some of these teams that have not historically been. I mean, Vanderbilt might sneak in, dude. That was a huge and I know people don't want to expand the playoff. I get it. I hear you. But at the same time, I think what I like the idea of more teams getting opportunities at the show being the national championship. So we'll see. I think Texas Tech, bullish on them. I think Oregon, people quietly keep forgetting about them.
I don't know. I watched them play Iowa, man, and it was the typical at Iowa game. And it was also raining and bad weather.
Oh, dude, it was miserable.
You got to consider those things. But I watched them and I was just like, because, for example, Orty, they ran the ball for like almost 400 yards, and they still only scored 18 points. And they would get to the red zone, they're still not utilizing play action. What I was like, is there something wrong with Dante Moore? Do you not have receivers that can get open? I just didn't know what I was watching.
No, I know. I'm just saying, a well-coached football team, so we'll see. But I don't know, man.
They are. They're right there. They're right there. They'll probably get in and going out. And Notre Dame's definitely going to be in. And yeah,
Notre Dame is.
They're playing better. Of course they are. They're not playing that many good teams anymore. They played their biggest games.
No, the Navy's probably the best game they've played in about 8 weeks. But
yeah, it'll be the best game they play the rest of the season. I think they might play. They might play Pitt. That's about it.
They got Pitt. I think they got USC, but
do they? Oh yeah, they have to, right? That's a rivalry.
You know who ended up might be in is James Madison. I saw they won again. They ended up might be in the team that's like the group of 5. Like
I think so.
Only because I'm looking at it right now. It looks like Cincinnati is the one. No, because they're Big 12, right?
Yes, right. Yeah, I believe so.
So, which would be kind of cool for James Madison. And don't sleep on James Madison because Bob Chesney is their football coach. Bob Chesney is a Pennsylvania guy. He coached at a D3 school about 30 minutes from my house called Salve Regina, which I don't even know had football. And he ended up winning like 3 league titles there. Then went to a Division II called Assumption, which is, fun fact, where Brian Kelly played college football and coached softball and was a defensive coordinator there right out of college. And then won league championships there, and then went to Holy Cross, a 1AA Catholic school in Massachusetts. A lot of people thought he should have got the BC job, but he took over for Signetti at James Madison. He's a hell of a football coach. They're going to go on a run. He's probably going to get the Penn State job, but just keep them, would not sleep on James Madison to be the team that ultimately gets in from the group of 5. I don't think they'll make some noise there, but I think I saw they won again this week. They were not, they'll be ranked probably in the top 25. I know they are in their coaches poll right now, so we'll see.
Right. So it's shaping up to be a very, very fun ending to the season. When we love to see that. You heard it here first. James Madison, college football playoff. Mr. Chesney, getting the Penn State job. You heard it here.
If I was LSU, I'd bring him to LSU, but he'll be a Penn Stater.
Slim pickings in the coaching carousel this year.
All right, you say that, Coach. He's big time.
All right, I heard you. We hear you. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. UJ Football Live, YouTube, Twitter, also wherever you get your podcast, audio wise. Check out UGA Live. That's the promo code on the NIL store, Georgia NIL store. Get 20% off your order using that code. Gunner Stockton merch. All those players we talked about today from the Georgia Bulldogs are on there. So go check them out, support them, and support Georgia as well. Artie, it's great to talk to you, man. I can't wait for next week. We'll see what happens. Georgia, Texas. In Athens, nighttime kick as well. So it's going to be a really, really fun game, and the energy is going to be palpable, I'm sure. So ready for that one. We'll see what happens, man.
Go Dogs.